I am Laura, and I am 32 years old. When I look back at how everything started, I can't help but think that the signs were always there. Small, quiet, almost invisible, like whispers I chose to ignore. Maybe because I wanted to believe in love more than I believed in myself. Maybe because I thought marriage was supposed to be about patience and understanding, not suspicion and doubt. But as I would later learn, sometimes patience just means giving someone more time to hurt you. My husband's name is Ethan. We met 6 years ago at a charity event in Chicago. He was charming in the kind of way that made people feel seen. When he talked to you, it was as if nothing else in the room mattered. I remember how he made me laugh that night. A genuine, uncontrollable kind of laughter that felt new after a long time of being guarded. He told me he worked in finance for a company that specialized in private investments, and he spoke with a quiet confidence that was hard to ignore. We started dating soon after. He was attentive, thoughtful, and, for a while, exactly what I thought I needed. He'd bring me flowers on Fridays just because, and on Sundays, we'd spend hours at this little diner near the river, talking about life, work, and what kind of house we'd buy one day. He'd always say, "Laura, I just want us to build something that feels peaceful." I remember loving that word, peaceful. It sounded like the future I wanted. After 2 years of dating, we got married. A small ceremony, just close friends and family. Nothing extravagant, but full of warmth. My father walked me down the aisle, and I remember Ethan's face. Calm, proud, like he knew he was right where he belonged. That day, I believed we were unbreakable. But marriage changes people. Or maybe it just reveals who they really are. Ethan started getting busier. His company, a mid-sized investment firm, was expanding, and he was promoted to a senior role. It came with long hours, travel, and endless meetings. At first, I tried to be supportive. I cooked dinner, waited up for him, even left little notes in his briefcase like a fool in love. But over time, something started shifting. He became distant. Not angry, not cold, just distant, as if he'd built an invisible wall around himself. Our conversations turned short. He'd come home, loosen his tie, pour himself a drink, and scroll through his phone. I'd ask about his day, and he'd mumble something vague. Meetings, reports, the usual. Then silence. I told myself it was just stress, that once the new project wrapped up, he'd come back to me. But deep down, a small voice whispered, he already left. It was early in the year when his company started planning their annual luxury gala. It was a big deal, something they hosted at an upscale hotel every year, filled with executives, investors, and industry people. For the first few years of our marriage, spouses were invited. I'd gone with him twice before. I still remember how proud I felt standing beside him, watching him shake hands and charm everyone. But this year was different. One evening, I was folding laundry when he came home, phone in hand, talking fast. He ended the call, looked at me briefly, and said, "Hey, about the company gala next month. It's employees only this time, so you won't need to worry about getting a dress or anything." I looked up, confused. "Employees only? That's new. They've always allowed spouses," he shrugged. "Yeah, I know, but management wants to keep it professional this time. Just the team. You understand, right?" He said it so casually as if it were a small thing, but something in his tone felt rehearsed. "Of course," I said quietly. "I just thought maybe they'd want you to bring your partner. To show support." He smiled a little, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Laura, it's not that kind of event. Besides, it'll be boring. Just speeches and business talk. Trust me, you're not missing anything." Then he changed the subject, just like that. Over the next few weeks, I noticed he became unusually secretive about his phone. He'd set it face down, take calls in another room, and smile at texts he wouldn't let me see. I didn't want to become the paranoid wife. I really didn't. But it's strange how your instincts can scream at you while your heart keeps shushing them. The week before the gala, he bought a new suit, a Tom Ford. I'd never seen him so particular about what to wear. I remember standing by the bedroom door, watching him adjust the jacket in the mirror. "You look handsome," I said softly. He turned, smiled politely, Thanks, big night. The partners will be there. I hesitated before asking, so, where is it being held this year? Hilton downtown, he replied quickly. Don't wait up for me. It'll probably run late. Something about the way he said that, don't wait up for me, felt like a final line in a play I didn't know I was part of. The night of the gala, I helped him with his tie. He smelled of his favorite cologne, the one he wore when he wanted to impress someone. I smoothed the collar, and he gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. Quick, impersonal, almost like a habit rather than affection. Then he left. I watched him from the window, walking confidently to his car, like a man stepping into his perfect life. An hour later, I was scrolling through social media, just to distract myself. That's when I saw it. A photo posted by his secretary, someone I'd met once or twice at office gatherings. The caption said, "Amazing night with the best team." It showed a group of people smiling at a ballroom, glasses raised. But my eyes didn't go to the caption or the smiles. They went to the reflection in the background mirror. Subtle, almost hidden, but there he was. Ethan, standing beside a woman in a deep red gown. His ex. Madison. I froze. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe. My mind tried to deny what my eyes were seeing. Madison, the woman he'd dated years before me, the one he'd claimed was ancient history. There they were, standing close. Too close, I zoomed in. Her hand was on his arm. His face had that same polite, practiced smile, the one I used to love. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet. It was quieter than that, a slow, cold realization that something sacred had been broken. For a long time, I just sat there. The house was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. I tried to think of explanations. Maybe she was there by coincidence. Maybe they were just talking. But the excuses sounded empty even in my head. I felt small, invisible. Then something unexpected happened. A message popped up on my phone. It was from Daniel, one of Ethan's co-workers I'd met at a barbecue months ago. He was a kind man, soft-spoken, one of the few who ever seemed genuine. His message said, "Hey Laura, are you coming to the gala tonight? I thought I'd see you here." My fingers trembled as I typed back. Ethan said it was employees only. There was a long pause. Then he replied, "Really? That's strange. A lot of spouses are here. Even the CEO's wife." That was the moment everything inside me went still. The doubt vanished. The fog cleared. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was being lied to, deliberately. But instead of breaking down, I felt something else rise within me. A kind of calm determination. I stood up, looked at myself in the mirror, and realized, if he wanted to humiliate me quietly, then I would remind him, gracefully, that I was not someone to be dismissed. I opened my closet and pulled out the navy blue evening dress I'd bought months ago, but never wore. It was elegant, modest, and sharp. I did my hair, applied light makeup, and wore the diamond earrings my mother gave me. I didn't rush. Every movement felt deliberate, steady. When I looked at myself one last time before leaving, I didn't see a broken wife. I saw a woman reclaiming her dignity. I called a car, gave the driver the hotel's address, and sat in silence as the city lights blurred past. My heart was pounding, but my face stayed calm. The kind of calm that comes when you realize you have nothing left to lose, only the truth to show. When the car stopped at the grand entrance of the Hilton, I could already hear the faint sound of music and laughter echoing from the ballroom inside. The valet opened my door and I stepped out, shoulders straight, head high. What I didn't know then was that I wasn't just walking into a gala. I was walking into the night that would change everything. When I stepped through the glass doors of the Hilton's ballroom, the first thing that hit me was the sound, the soft hum of conversation, laughter mingling with classical music, the faint clinking of champagne glasses. Everything looked immaculate. Golden chandeliers, polished marble floors, and elegantly dressed people scattered across the hall, all smiling as if nothing in their perfect world could ever go wrong. I I paused for a moment near the entrance, just to take it in. Not because I was nervous, though I was, but because I wanted to feel every second of this moment. The calm before the storm, you could say. I saw waiters moving gracefully through the crowd, balancing trays of hors d'oeuvres and wine. People were laughing, shaking hands, taking photos under the company's banner. I spotted a few familiar faces, the board members I'd met before, executives, their spouses, all of them people who had once smiled politely at me when Ethan introduced me as his wife. And there he was. Ethan. Standing near the main table, drink in hand, surrounded by a small group of colleagues. The Tom Ford suit I had ironed that morning looked sharp under the ballroom lights. His hair was neatly styled, his smile easy and polished. And beside him, Madison. She looked like a painting that belonged in a gallery. Her red gown shimmering under the chandeliers, her hand lightly resting on Ethan's arm as she whispered something in his ear. He laughed softly, that laugh, the same one that used to be mine. For a brief second, my breath caught. It wasn't jealousy, it was disbelief at how effortlessly he could stand there, lying to everyone, pretending that nothing was wrong, pretending that I didn't exist. I straightened my shoulders and walked forward. A few people noticed me first. Daniel, the coworker who had messaged me earlier. His eyes widened in surprise, then softened into an approving smile. He discreetly gave a small nod as if to say, "Good for you." That gave me courage. As I moved through the crowd, heads turned. Some recognized me, some just admired the confidence with which I carried myself. I greeted a few politely, exchanged calm smiles, and let the moment stretch. Finally, I reached the main table. Ethan hadn't noticed me yet. He was talking to one of the company directors, gesturing with that practiced charm he used whenever he wanted to impress someone. I stood quietly beside them for a moment, letting the silence grow just long enough for him to feel it. Then, softly, I said, "Good evening, everyone." The director turned first, smiling. "Laura, it's been a while. We were just saying it's a shame you couldn't make it this year." Ethan froze. His face went pale. "Actually," I continued, keeping my voice light but steady, "Ethan told me it was employees only this time. But when I heard so many spouses were attending, I didn't want to miss the chance to celebrate with everyone. I'm so glad I came." You could almost feel the shift in the air. A few people exchanged looks. Madison's smile faltered slightly, her hand dropping from Ethan's arm. Ethan cleared his throat. "Laura, this is a surprise." I met his eyes. "Yes," I said softly. "I can imagine it is." The director, clearly sensing tension, chuckled awkwardly and excused himself to greet someone else. That left the three of us standing there, me, my husband, and his ex. Madison broke the silence first. "Laura, right? Ethan's wife? I've heard so much about you." Her tone was friendly, but her eyes had that gleam, the kind people have when they think they've already won. I smiled gently. "And I've heard quite a lot about you too, Madison. It's nice to finally see who Ethan's been spending all those late nights with." Her smile froze. Ethan quickly interjected. "Laura, that's not—" I raised my hand slightly. "Relax, Ethan. I'm just making conversation." Then I turned to Madison again. "By the way, that's a beautiful dress. It must take confidence to wear red when you're attending a company event with someone else's husband." The words were calm. Not loud, not dramatic, but they hit their mark. I saw Madison's expression shift, confusion, then defensiveness, then silence. Before she could respond, I gave a small, polite nod and walked away, leaving them standing there. I wasn't interested in a scene. Not yet. I wanted him to feel it slowly, the unraveling. The quiet dread that comes when you realize the person you thought you could manipulate has just turned the entire room's attention toward you. I made my way toward the bar. Daniel joined me a moment later, handing me a glass of water. "That was impressive," he whispered, half smiling. "You really caught him off guard." I gave a soft laugh. "He caught me off guard first. I'm just returning the favor." Daniel looked thoughtful. He's been different lately. Everyone noticed. I didn't want to say anything before, but it's been obvious something's going on. I glanced across the room. Ethan was talking rapidly to Madison, his jaw tight. He looked like a man trying to hold his life together with trembling hands. "Don't worry," I said quietly. "Tonight's not about fighting. It's about truth. I'll let the truth speak for itself." An hour passed. People mingled, music played, laughter returned, but I could tell eyes kept glancing toward our corner of the room. News travels fast, especially in corporate circles, and I didn't have to do a thing to feed it. The image of Ethan standing between his wife and his ex was enough to start whispers that would ripple through his professional world for weeks. After a while, one of the senior partners approached me. A tall, silver-haired man named Mr. Brennan. He'd always been respectful toward me at previous events. "Laura," he said warmly, "it's so nice to see you again. You should join us at the head table. We're about to start the main dinner." I glanced at Ethan, who was still pretending to laugh at something someone said, clearly uncomfortable. "That would be lovely," I replied. Mr. Brennan led me to the table, the main table, the one reserved for the board members and senior staff. Ethan had been seated there too, of course, as one of the company's executives. But when I sat down beside Mr. Brennan, the staff quietly added an extra chair, right next to Ethan. I smiled politely. He didn't. Dinner began. Conversations floated around the table, and I joined in gracefully, discussing travel, business news, and art. I made sure my tone was calm, intelligent, and collected, the kind that earns silent respect. I could feel Ethan shrinking beside me, saying little, his confidence bleeding away in small, invisible drops. At one point, Mr. Brennan turned to me. "You've always supported Ethan's work so much. We admire that. It's rare to see such grounded partnership." I smiled gently. I try to be supportive, though sometimes it's challenging when work commitments start, blending into personal time. It was subtle, but it landed. A few people raised their eyebrows. Ethan shot me a warning glance under the table, but I ignored it. Madison, sitting a few seats away, looked tense. Her charm had faded. She was no longer the sparkling guest. She was just another woman sitting awkwardly at someone else's table. When the dinner ended, speeches began. Ethan was supposed to give one. I watched as he walked to the podium, the confident man I once knew replaced by someone who could barely meet anyone's eyes. His voice wavered at the beginning, steadying only after he read from his notes. I listened, calm, almost detached. He spoke about company growth, teamwork, loyalty. The irony of those words nearly made me laugh. When he finished, polite applause followed. As he stepped down, I caught his gaze briefly. For a moment, there was something in his eyes. Guilt, maybe fear, maybe both. After the speeches, people started moving toward the dance floor. The lights dimmed, the music softened. I stayed seated for a while, just observing. Ethan approached cautiously. "Laura," he said quietly, "what are you doing here?" I looked up at him. "I told you, celebrating," he exhaled sharply. "You're making a scene." I tilted my head. "Am I? I haven't raised my voice, haven't accused you of anything. I've simply attended a company event, like every other spouse here. You're the one who seems uncomfortable." He looked around nervously, lowering his voice even more. "You don't understand. Madison, she's just..." I stood up slowly. "Don't insult me, Ethan. I saw the photo. I saw the way you looked at her. And I know you lied to me. But don't worry. I'm not here to destroy your night. Not tonight," he frowned. "Then what are you here for?" I smiled faintly. "To remind you that some things can't be hidden behind polite smiles and good suits. Not everything can be managed like a business deal." He didn't answer. As I turned to leave, I saw Mr. Brennan again. He stopped me with a kind smile. "Laura, before you go, we're organizing a new community project next month. You have such good insight. I'd love for you to join the planning team." I blinked, surprised. "Oh, I'd be honored." Ethan's face fell. He knew exactly what that meant. that his personal mess had just introduced me to his professional circle, not as a tag-along spouse, but as someone they respected. I thanked Mr. Brennan, shook his hand, and left the ballroom with quiet grace. As I stepped into the cold night air, I finally exhaled. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. The kind of clear that only comes after heartbreak. Ethan could have been honest. He could have chosen integrity, but he didn't. And now, the story of his lie had started to spread in a room full of people whose opinions mattered deeply to him. And that was just the beginning. Because as I stood there, under the soft glow of the city lights, I realized something. Revenge didn't need to be loud or cruel. It just needed to be precise. And I was just getting started. When I got home that night, the house felt heavier than usual. Every room was perfectly tidy, every light dimmed, every corner still. But underneath that calm, something had shifted. The illusion was gone. I wasn't coming back to my marriage. I was walking into the echo of something that used to be one. I took off my heels, placed them neatly by the door, and sat on the couch. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but there were no tears left. Just a quiet stillness, the kind that comes when you realize that sadness has finished its work, and what's left now is clarity. An hour later, I heard his car pull into the driveway. He came in slowly, like a man returning from a crime scene, not a party. His tie was loosened, his jacket folded over his arm, and his eyes, tired, searching. "Laura," he said, voice low. "We need to talk." I looked up from the glass of water in my hands. "Do we?" He hesitated. "Please don't do this. You embarrassed me tonight." I raised an eyebrow. "I embarrassed you?" "Ethan, you lied to me. You took your ex to a company gala and told me it was employees only. And somehow I'm the problem because I showed up?" He sighed heavily, pacing. "You don't understand the politics of my job. Madison's firm partnered with us recently, and the CEO thought it would be strategic if she came. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to get upset." I stared at him for a long moment. "So you lied to protect me? That's your story?" He rubbed his temples. "I made a mistake. It's not what you think." I leaned back against the sofa. "You keep saying that. But tell me, Ethan, what exactly do I think?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. No answer. That silence was enough. It said more than words ever could. Finally, I stood up. "I'm tired. We'll talk tomorrow." He looked like he wanted to argue, but I walked past him, calm, composed, leaving him standing in the living room with his guilt. That night, I lay awake for hours. I wasn't planning revenge then, not yet. I was thinking about who I'd become in this marriage, how I'd learned to walk quietly so he wouldn't be annoyed, how I'd stopped asking questions to avoid conflict, how I'd started measuring my worth by how much peace I could keep. Somewhere along the way, I'd shrunk myself to fit inside his comfort. But that night, something in me began to expand again. The next morning, I woke up early and made coffee. When Ethan came downstairs, he looked surprised to see me already dressed. Jeans, blazer, hair neatly tied back. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Out," I said simply. "Out where?" "To think." He frowned, but I walked out before he could say another word. I went to the lake, the same one where we used to walk when we first started dating. It was quiet, peaceful, the water reflecting the morning sun. I sat on a bench and thought about what to do next. Revenge, to me, wasn't about hurting him physically or even publicly. It was about balance, about restoring the dignity he'd tried to take from me. If he valued reputation above truth, then reputation would be where he learned his lesson. That afternoon, I received a call from Mr. Brennan, the senior partner who'd invited me to the community project. He wanted to schedule a meeting. "We'd like to include you in some early discussions," he said warmly. "You have a calm presence. We need that." His words stayed with me. A calm presence. It was ironic. My calm was what Ethan had always underestimated. Over the next few weeks, I attended the meetings. They were held at the company's conference center. Yes, Ethan's company. At first, he looked startled to see me walking through the same halls as him, chatting politely with his colleagues, confident and composed. "Laura," he said once after a meeting, pulling me aside. "Why are you here?" I smiled. "Mr. Brennan invited me. He thinks I can contribute. You can't just insert yourself into my workplace." I looked him straight in the eyes. "I didn't. Your board did." He stared at me, speechless, and for the first time, I saw the flicker of uncertainty behind his arrogance. As days passed, something interesting happened. People started approaching me, not as Ethan's wife, but as Laura. They asked for my thoughts, my perspective, even advice. I listened carefully, offered insights, and built quiet connections. Meanwhile, Madison's presence began to fade. Word around the office, which I heard secondhand, of course, was that her partnership project wasn't performing as expected. Apparently, she'd been more interested in socializing with executives than actually contributing. The same charm Ethan once found fascinating was now making her seem unprofessional. I didn't need to do anything. The cracks were forming on their own. But one afternoon, I was leaving a meeting when I overheard something in the hallway. 2 employees were talking quietly near the elevator. "Did you hear about Ethan and Madison?" Brennan's furious. Said it was unethical to bring a personal relationship into company negotiations. "Yeah," the other replied. "Apparently, HR got wind of it. Someone sent them photos from the gala." Photos. I hadn't shared any, but clearly others had seen enough that night to connect the dots. When I got home, Ethan was already there, pacing. His tie was loose, his expression stormy. "Did you talk to Brennan?" he demanded. "No," I replied calmly, setting down my bag. "Why?" "Because he's suddenly distant with me. He canceled our project review meeting, and HR wants to talk." "What did you do?" I folded my arms. "Ethan, you've built your entire career on appearances. Maybe it's time you face what those appearances cost." He stepped closer, his voice rising. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I met his eyes steadily. "No. I'm reclaiming what you tried to make me forget. My self-respect." He stared at me for a long time, searching for guilt that wasn't there. Finally, he said, "You're not the woman I married." I smiled faintly. "You're right. I'm not." She believed every word you said. That night, he slept in the guest room. I didn't mind. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean, honest. In the following weeks, I continued working with the community project team. It was fulfilling, creating something meaningful, independent of him. I met professionals, entrepreneurs, even a few women who'd gone through similar experiences. They admired my calm composure, not knowing it was carved from pain. Ethan's world, meanwhile, was unraveling quietly. Rumors spread, meetings were reassigned, and his once friendly co-workers now kept polite distance. Madison stopped showing up altogether after a particularly tense board meeting. One morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his laptop. "They reassigned me," he said flatly. "They're putting someone else in charge of the Madison account. Brennan said I should take a break, reassess priorities," he called it. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat across from him. "Maybe that's not such a bad idea." He looked up sharply. "Do you even care?" I met his gaze. "I used to. Now I just understand." He frowned. "Understand what?" "That sometimes losing everything you took for granted is the only way to learn what it was worth." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. As weeks turned into months, our marriage became a quiet truce. 2 people sharing a house but living separate lives. I focused on my work, on myself, on rediscovering what made me feel alive. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since before we met. I began volunteering at the shelter downtown. Every small act of independence felt like a thread stitching me back together. Then, one evening, Mr. Brennan invited me to a formal dinner, a follow-up for the community initiative. It was at the same Hilton ballroom where everything had fallen apart months before. When I walked in, I felt a strange calm. The chandeliers were the same, the music similar, but I wasn't the same woman anymore. Midway through the event, Brennan took the stage to thank everyone. Then, to my surprise, he mentioned me by name. I want to recognize Laura Henderson for her dedication and insight. Her calm, thoughtful approach helped us align this project with our company's values. She's an example of integrity and grace under pressure. Applause filled the room. I smiled modestly, but inside, something deep and quiet lifted. Not pride in the public praise, but peace in knowing that I had rebuilt my name on my own terms. Later that night, Ethan approached me. He looked tired, smaller somehow. "Congratulations," he said softly. "Thank you. I'm proud of you." I studied him carefully. For once, there was no pretense in his tone, just sincerity and regret. "I'm glad to hear that," I said. He hesitated. "Laura, I know I can't undo what I did. I just want you to know, I see it now. All of it." I gave a small nod. "Good. Then maybe there's still something left for you to rebuild, even if it's not with me." He lowered his eyes. "Are you leaving?" I exhaled softly. "Not tonight, but soon." As I turned to go, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirrored wall. The same mirror that had once shown me a betrayal. This time the woman looking back wasn't broken. She was steady, calm, whole. Revenge, I realized, had already done its quiet work. It hadn't destroyed him. It had freed me. When I walked into that grand ballroom, time seemed to slow down. My heels tapped softly against the marble floor, echoing faintly under the golden chandeliers. Heads began to turn, conversations paused mid-sentence, and an almost imperceptible hush spread through the room. It wasn't the loud kind of attention that comes with spectacle. It was the quiet, unplanned kind. The kind that comes when something unexpected, graceful and just slightly dangerous walks in. The same hall where my husband had forbidden me from coming, the one he said was strictly for employees only, now shimmered with laughter and the faint notes of a live jazz band. The company's logo glowed across a huge LED wall. It was beautiful, I'll give him that. Everything was perfection. White roses in crystal vases, champagne towers catching the light, people dressed like royalty. But none of that compared to the look on Eric's face when he saw me walk in. He froze mid-laugh. He had been leaning toward Olivia, yes, that Olivia, his ex, when I entered. She was wearing a silver gown, matching his tie. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so insulting. He blinked once, twice, trying to process the sight of me. My navy gown caught the light as I moved. I could almost see the color drain from his face as realization hit him. For a moment, I didn't look at him. Instead, I turned to greet the board members standing near the entrance. "Mrs. Hart, you made it," one of them said warmly. I smiled, offering my hand with perfect calmness. "I wouldn't have missed it," I replied. You see, while Eric thought he was keeping me out, he forgot one small detail. The company's chairman, Mr. Hart, wasn't just his boss. He was also my father's longtime business associate. They'd worked together for years before Eric ever joined the firm. When I called Mr. Hart earlier that afternoon, he was surprised to hear I hadn't been invited. He didn't hesitate. "Laura, you're family to us. Of course you should be here," he'd said. And just like that, my name was added to the guest list, under special guest of the board. Now, standing in that ballroom, I moved gracefully from one board member to another. They greeted me with warmth and genuine respect. Some even complimented me on the charity foundation I had launched earlier that year, something Eric never once mentioned at home. I smiled, accepted their compliments, and let the moments stretch. I could feel Eric's discomfort growing across the room. When I finally turned to him, I caught his eyes. He gave me that nervous half-smile I used to love. But now it just looked small. "Laura, you're here," he said, walking toward me as if I might vanish if he blinked. "Yes," I said calmly. I was invited. Olivia stood just behind him, clutching her silver clutch, looking suddenly unsure of herself. Her confidence had dimmed the moment she realized everyone in the room was watching this exchange. Eric cleared his throat. "I thought You said you weren't interested in coming, he lied, his voice slightly trembling. I tilted my head gently, smiling. That's odd. You told me I wasn't allowed to. You said it was an employees-only event. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence around us did the work for me. A few nearby guests exchanged glances. Someone coughed softly. Even the band seemed to play a little quieter. Eric stammered. I just meant... I understand. I interrupted softly, still smiling. But it's fine. I'm glad I came. It's such a beautiful evening. And then I turned to Olivia. You look lovely, Olivia. Silver suits you. Her lips tightened, but she managed a weak, Thank you, Laura. It's been a while. Yes, I said, my tone even. Though it feels like some things never change. Before either of them could reply, Mr. Hart's voice boomed across the room. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our guest of honor tonight, Laura Bennett. I froze for just a moment. I hadn't expected that. The spotlight shifted toward me and polite applause filled the hall. Eric's expression twisted into confusion and something close to panic. I could see the question forming on his lips. Guest of honor? Mr. Hart took the microphone and smiled in my direction. Laura has been a remarkable supporter of our foundation partnerships this year. Her efforts in the education grant program helped us expand our outreach to over 20 schools. We owe her a great deal of thanks. Applause followed, genuine and warm. I could see pride in the board's faces, admiration even. And then I glanced at Eric, who suddenly looked very small among them. His jaw tightened, and Olivia stared down at her drink. When I walked up to the stage, I could feel hundreds of eyes on me. I took a deep breath and spoke in that calm, composed voice I had practiced for years as a teacher. Thank you, Mr. Hart. I'm honored to be here tonight. This company's work means a lot to many families, including mine. And I believe that when we support each other, in business and in life, we build something that lasts beyond numbers. I paused, just enough for the words to settle. Integrity, loyalty, and respect. These are the values that build real success. And I'm grateful to be part of a community that holds those values close. When I finished, the applause came again, this time louder. I smiled, nodded graciously, and stepped down. As I passed Eric, I didn't look at him. But I heard him whisper, Laura, what are you doing? I leaned in just slightly and said softly, standing where I belong. I returned to my seat and enjoyed the rest of the speeches. The entire time, Eric's discomfort lingered in the air like a faint perfume. He tried to smile for photos, but his eyes darted toward me again and again, uncertain. Olivia excused herself midway through dinner, murmuring something about a headache. I didn't stop her. When dessert was served, Mr. Hart raised his glass for a toast. To new beginnings, he said, and to people who remind us of what real partnership means. Everyone lifted their glasses. Eric hesitated but lifted his too. Our eyes met again, and I let a small, knowing smile form on my lips. Later that night, when the gala ended and people began to leave, Eric followed me out to the lobby. Laura, can we talk? He said. His voice was strained, as if he'd been holding his breath all evening. I stopped, turned, and met his gaze. About what? You made me look ridiculous in there, he snapped quietly. Do you have any idea what that could do to my reputation? I let out a soft, humorless laugh. Your reputation? You mean the one you were polishing while taking your ex to a gala and lying to your wife? He looked around nervously to see if anyone was listening. Please, not here. I leaned closer, my voice still calm. Relax, Eric, I didn't humiliate you. You did that yourself. All I did was show up where I belonged. He stared at me, speechless. I continued, and don't worry, I'm not done yet, he frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I gave a gentle, unhurried smile. It means I'm taking back everything you've taken for granted. Then I walked away, my heels echoing softly as I left him standing there, still in his perfect suit, looking like a man who'd just realized his whole world was about to shift. That night, when I got home, I took off my earrings, wiped away my makeup, and looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection stared back. calm, steady, and finally awake. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel unsure. I felt ready. The quiet strength I had lost somewhere along the way was back, and it burned steady in my chest. The gala had been the beginning. Now it was time to show Eric that betrayal has a way of circling back, quietly, calmly, but with perfect precision. He had humiliated me without a thought, but I wasn't going to scream or cry. I was going to teach him what real consequences look like, and I was going to do it in a way he'd never forget. The night after the gala, I sat awake in bed, staring at the faint city lights beyond my window, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional sound of cars passing on the street. Everything seemed quiet, yet my mind was wide awake. For the first time in a long while, my thoughts were sharp and clear. Eric's face from that evening kept flashing before me, that perfect blend of confusion, panic, and fear. But there was something else in his eyes too, realization. He finally understood that I was no longer the woman he could manipulate or silence. In the days that followed, Eric tried to patch things up, or at least to appear like he was trying. The morning after the gala, I woke up to a bouquet of lilies on the kitchen counter and a note that said, "We need to talk." "I'm sorry." I didn't reply. I brewed my coffee, fed our cat, and went about my morning like the note didn't exist. It was my small way of reclaiming space, silence as a weapon, not submission. By evening, he came home early. He looked nervous, the way a child looks when caught stealing candy. "Laura," he began softly, "I messed up. I should have never taken Olivia. It was a work decision, not personal." I didn't even look up from my laptop. A work decision that required matching outfits and lying to your wife? He flinched. "It wasn't like that. I thought it'd look better for the investors if..." I closed the laptop quietly and met his eyes. "If what, Eric? If you pretended I didn't exist? Or if you showed up with the woman you used to cheat with before we were married?" He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. I continued calmly. "You know, the funny thing is, I used to think silence was weakness. I used to think if I didn't scream or cry, I wasn't standing up for myself. But I see it differently now. Silence is power when it comes from control, not fear." He sighed heavily. "Laura, please. I made a mistake. I was stupid. But you walking into that gala the way you did, you embarrassed me in front of the entire board." I tilted my head, studying him. "You're still thinking about yourself. You're worried about embarrassment, not about betrayal." For a long moment, he said nothing. And in that silence, something shifted inside me, a final thread snapping quietly, releasing me from whatever tie had kept me tethered to him. That night, while he slept on the couch, I opened my laptop again and began drafting a plan. Not out of spite or anger, but from a need for closure. Revenge wasn't about destruction anymore. It was about balance. About restoring the scales he had tipped so carelessly. The first step was simple. Gather everything. Financial statements, account details, company shares, anything that carried both our names. We had built a lot together over 6 years. Well, I had built, and he had spent. I knew the ins and outs of our accounts better than he ever did. For months, I had been the one paying bills, transferring funds, keeping the household running while he focused on climbing the corporate ladder. That ladder, I now realized, was built on my quiet effort. By the end of the week, I had a clear picture. Eric's promotion depended heavily on the image of a stable, respectable family man. His company valued partnership, reputation, and loyalty, the same words I had used in my speech at the gala. And now, that image was about to crack, not because I shouted, but because I moved with precision. The next step came naturally. I called Mr. Hart's assistant and asked to schedule a meeting. She was delighted. "Mr. Hart was so impressed with your speech, Mrs. Bennett. He'll be thrilled to see you." When I met him a few days later in his office, he greeted me with genuine warmth. "Laura, you were the highlight of that evening," he said with a smile. "I wish more people had your grace." I smiled politely. "Thank you, Mr. Hart. That means a lot. I wanted to talk to you about something, not as Eric's wife, but as someone who cares about the company's image." He gestured for me to continue. "There's something you should know. I said gently. And I say this only because I respect the organization and the values it stands for. Then, with calm precision, I told him everything. The deception, the lies about the gala, the favoritism toward Olivia, who, by the way, was still an employee under Eric's supervision. I didn't exaggerate or dramatize. I simply laid out the facts. Mr. Hart listened carefully, his face growing more serious with every passing minute. "That's disappointing," he said finally. "Eric is a talented manager, but this crosses ethical lines. Thank you for telling me, Laura. I assure you this will be handled discreetly." I nodded. "That's all I ask." Walking out of his office, I felt a deep sense of calm. I hadn't yelled, threatened, or sought revenge in the way people imagine it. I had simply handed truth to those who needed to see it, and truth, when revealed quietly, has the loudest impact. 2 weeks later, Eric came home looking pale. He dropped his briefcase on the table, loosened his tie, and sat down like a man carrying a weight he could barely hold. "They're auditing my department," he said softly. I poured myself a glass of water and asked, "Oh? Why?" He gave a hollow laugh. Olivia filed a complaint. "Then HR found out about the gala photos, the spending. Everything's unraveling. Mr. Hart hasn't spoken to me in days." I kept my tone neutral. "That sounds serious." "It is," he said, rubbing his face. "Laura, please, you have to help me. They respect you. Maybe if you spoke to them." I looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "Eric, I spent years standing beside you while you ignored me. You didn't need my voice then. You don't get it now." He stared at me, desperate. "So that's it? You're just going to let me lose everything?" I took a sip of water, then replied calmly, "I didn't make you lose anything. I just stopped covering up the truth." The following month was a blur for him. Meetings, investigations, whispers at work. He was eventually asked to step down temporarily pending review, but we both knew what that meant. The once confident man who had strutted through life believing he could do no wrong was now unsure of his every step. Meanwhile, I began focusing on my own life. The charity foundation I had built gained new attention after the gala. Invitations came in for interviews, collaborations, and events. People admired how I handled myself that night. Calm, composed, graceful under fire. It was strange how the same moment that had been meant to humiliate me had become the foundation of something new. When I moved into my new apartment a few months later, Eric called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. His voice was weary. "Laura, I wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything. I lost the job. Olivia's gone, and I realized I lost you long before that." I stayed silent for a moment, then said softly, "You didn't lose me, Eric. You let me go." There was nothing more to say. He wanted forgiveness. But forgiveness wasn't something I owed him. It was something I gave myself. That night, as I unpacked my things in my quiet new place, I found the dress I wore to the gala. I hung it neatly in the closet and smiled. Not because of what it represented, but because of what it had taught me. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks in quietly, dressed in calm and grace, and rewrites the ending. I learned that revenge doesn't have to destroy. It can simply reveal, and sometimes the most unforgettable revenge is not shouting, not fighting, but living beautifully after someone tried to break you. As I closed the closet door, I whispered to myself, "He'll remember that night forever, and so will I, but for very different reasons." Then I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the city lights flicker, calm, peaceful, and finally free. And that's my story. How my husband told me not to come to his company's luxury gala, took his ex instead, and learned that sometimes the quietest person in the room carries the most powerful kind of revenge. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to My Calm Revenge, where every story reminds us that strength doesn't have to shout. Sometimes it simply speaks softly and still changes everything.